The following is a conversation with Kyle Gillette. Kyle is a business coach and has worked with a number of business owners to help them work on their mindset and has helped numerous blue collar and white collar businesses improve operations and grow to the next level. Tune in to learn more about Kyle's story. Kyle, we just had some good conversation earlier, and I'm sure we have some cool stuff to talk about. But appreciate you taking the time. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you, Daniel. I'm excited to be here and share with your audience and learn from you too.
Awesome, appreciate it. Well, definitely, I'll have a lot more to learn from you than the other way around. But I'm sure we'll have a good conversation. So, you're up to a lot of cool stuff. You get to help out a lot of really interesting businesses. But just to get started, what's your background story, man? Where'd you grow up? Anything cool you have to share about that?
Yeah, most people don't get to meet a son of a farmer. So I'm a son of an orange farmer in the Central Valley of California and did that from sixth, seventh grade all the way through till my last year of high school and just various jobs and mostly in the summer working with people. So that was a pretty cool experience. And then went off to college to study kinesiology to become a physical therapist. Not for me. It was I love the physicality of life and exercise and all that, but it wasn't for me. Did an amazing internship with the guy that knows what the heck he's doing, and it's really cool what he's doing.
Mhm.
But I went, it's not for me. And so my senior year, I went off to India to go on a mission trip and got exposed to different folks, different world, and met a guy named John that was on the trip with us. And he called me up and said, "Hey, there's a job for you here in." I went to school in San Luis Obispo, and he said, "Why don't you interview for the job?" And he explained to me that it was working at a men's mentoring program.
Mhm.
And what that meant was I was going to live with these guys that are 18 to 25 years old. They're struggling in life. Some of them had drug and alcohol histories, abuse histories, just really lost in life. And I remember when he called me, that was just a couple weeks after sitting at my desk in my apartment and almost in tears going, basically, I'm afraid of life. I'm afraid to become an adult because I was in college at the time and I was like just absolutely loving college and not ready to go professional.
Into adulthood.
And I was 40 pounds overweight and just a dumpster fire. And he's calling me to say, "Hey, you should go lead these guys, that their lives are dumpster fires." And I'm going, I don't know, man. So anyway, I went for it and I took the interview, drove up to the property and 20 acres, rolling green hills. There's a pet resort on the property, just old farmhouse built in 1885, just gorgeous place. Knock on the door. I remember walking up the concrete steps, knocking on the farmhouse door, and Jack, the president of the program, opens it, shakes my hand. We interview for an hour and a half. Interview's over, and he says, "Do you want the job?" I'm like, wait a second. I don't know you. You want me to live in this place for a year of my life, give up like a lot of things because I wasn't going to be able to hang out with friends, et cetera, et cetera. I said, yes. 10 years later, I'm still in the program and I'm running it. So not right now, obviously, but like 10 years after that moment, I was still in the program and running it. So it was a huge decision and one of the best decisions I've made in my life. So that's kind of the very start of my work history and training history, really, to do what I'm doing now.
Got it. Interesting. I thought of a funny joke just now. You know how, I'm not going to kind of be explicit, but you know how whenever someone says son of a this, son of a that, like whenever someone insults you, they call you son of a farmer. Is that a joke?
Hey, that's a compliment to me.
Listen, you
Yeah.
son of a farmer.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, my dad's the fourth or so, maybe even farther back generation farming. So I'll take the insult, quote unquote, for sure.
No, I was just taking it as a compliment. I just, whenever I heard it, you always hear like the more explicit version. So when I heard it, I was like, oh, like that's a really, really funny.
Right. It's true.
Yeah. Awesome to hear about the kind of initial work that you got to do. And I'm sure it was awesome to kind of help people out. And even though you were dealing with some of your personal stuff, what kind of stuff were you doing after that? Or did you follow along like right after still doing stuff in coaching or doing stuff in industry? Like what was your path after that job?
Yeah, I was real fortunate because basically I was mentored the whole program for 9+ years. I was mentored by the president of the program who had run 30 different businesses and most of them really successfully. And so I'm just getting this wisdom dumped on me every single day from him. And then on Tuesdays, especially, we would go to lunch and he would spend time with me and talk to me and coach me and interact with me real intentionally. And that was amazing because I could take that instantly and apply it to when I lived in the program and then when I ran the pet resort in the program. So that was my first experience of cutting my teeth in business. And in I was in the pet resort running it for about 3 years and we doubled the revenue of the business, which it was underneath the nonprofit. So all the revenue went to the nonprofit. So we were able to support the whole program through the pet resort because of successful leadership and, most importantly, really employees that actually are doing a great job. And so that was great. And then towards the end of working there, I got to run the whole program, which was more coaching experience and more experience leading these guys. So I was really fortunate to have 10 years of real coaching and mentoring training, and then to put it on to work directly as I got that experience. Partway through that time, my wife and I met, we got married, had a couple kids, and we decided that we needed to move closer to her family ultimately. So we moved up to the Pacific Northwest, and things changed. Let's just say I didn't have as much luck in the job world as I had when I was in California. So first 4 months living here, I applied to 50, not 15, 50 jobs, got 2 interviews, and landed a really crappy corporate job out here, and then quit that after 4 months or no, after 6 months. And then eventually got an HR job that introduced me to the coaching world. And then everything was rainbows and unicorns after that. So that was the journey.
Awesome, interesting. I think one of the things I forget if it was a guest that told me in the video, a friend, but when you come out of college, all these companies are almost looking at you like a really shiny object, and then when you're a few years out, like they're like, oh, you're just another person. So definitely, it definitely can resonate with that, and I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to that as well. But you mentioned that you were able to have this mentorship from someone who was a bit older than you, really successful businessman. Just curious, did he run like a bunch of different kinds of businesses, or it was all within the same industry where he became successful?
Yeah, so he ran a lot of different restaurants, chain restaurants. A&W, I think, was one of the main ones that he ran, a few of them. And then he had a bunch of different business partners. But the business that was his most successful one that generated the most revenue was a ambulance business. So he had an ambulance business in Hawaii and Texas. And those were super successful for him. And I think that's where he made a lot of his money, by selling those businesses. But he did so many different things. I mean, I don't think he even told me all of them because there's so many of them. But he was diversified for sure, and he bought stock in Apple, and I think that helped him out a little bit before things even were anything for them, along with some other stock that was a good call. So he was real fortunate, and he's still working there. He's almost, I think he's over 80, and he's still working at the men's mentoring program, which is amazing. Almost 30 years of being there and mentoring guys is really a beautiful thing, in my opinion.
No, that's really impressive. It's kind of interesting when you see, a lot of these, people become really people become really successful. I don't know why I can't speak today, but a lot of times they'll not just have, one different business line. They'll be involved in restaurants or leisure or kind of, emergency or medical industry. Is there anything that you think you took away from him, or any characteristics that shine from him regarding the kind of person that it takes to do this kind of things?
Yeah, all that work was a wonderful thing, and he was a savvy business person. He was always having a bigger vision. He always had a bigger vision for what the program was going to be. So it started out with just a couple students, and then it became this much bigger vision of how can we self-sustain it and have a huge impact on the community, which then came the pet resort. And then he was like, well, let's have a bigger vision of impacting people in prison. So then we started a training program that the prisoners actually trained dogs to be given to veterans that have PTSD, right? And then we added a grooming and various other things over the course of time. So the vision just got bigger and bigger. So that's one piece of it. But the other side, which I think is even more vital, is he focused on who, not how, to quote Darren Hardy. Like, he really focused on that part because he recognized that the value of the business is tied up in the who of it versus in the how of it. And so when he brought in the right people and connected with the right people outside of the organization, both within the work that I was doing with him, but then prior to that as well, he was hugely successful. Because it's not like he was doing the day-to-day. He wasn't.
You can't.
He was present to oversee. You hear the phrase, don't work in your business, but work on it. To me, there's a third level, which is work over it. And that's how he ran businesses. He was over them, not working on them or in them, but over them, where he had other people work on them instead. And that, to me, was one of the biggest lessons that I got from him. So I would say those are the two components that made him a success.
Yep, I think definitely. I really resonate with one of the things you said. I think a lot of people, you can't get really successful or scale all by yourself. I mean, it's just like the to-do list is ever evolving. So I think the big challenge is learning to trust and learning to delegate. And obviously, in the beginning, when you're just starting something, you're going to wear 1,000 hats. But over time, hopefully, as you get funding and as you become a little more successful, you get to build that team and make that happen. And once you do one thing really well, you kind of try to repeat the cycle in different industries. So definitely really resonate with that point. But great to hear about that, and awesome that you got that mentorship opportunity. You mentioned that you were in that role, kind of working with him and having him as a mentor, and then eventually you got into this HR role, which ultimately led you back into coaching. How was the transition between working in HR to kind of going into coaching again?
Yeah, so that transition was fun because I got introduced to the world of DISC. I don't know if you're familiar with DISC or not. Okay, so DISC is a behavioral analysis assessment, and it looks at 4 different personality types, and you learn about the different types of people based on these 4 criteria. And it can be summarized as there's people that operate from an aggressive mentality, and then others that operate from optimistic mentality, others that operate from like a safety. They want to feel safe and secure and comfortable and controlled. And then there's those that operate more from a like perfectionism or expert logic type
Mhm.
mentality. So I started studying that, got certified in it, and then was fortunate to be able to do assessments on 100 people. The organization I worked in had 100 employees. And so as the HR person, I got to work with every single one of those people one-on-one for an hour each. So I instantly got 100 hours worth of direct experience to
Yeah.
do these assessments. And I went, wow, this is fascinating. People are fascinating, which is really the foundation of my business, is the concept that people are fascinating. And then if you operate from that in your business, you're going to have far greater success than if you operate from the perspective of people are what I use to be successful. That's not going to work out near as well. But anyway, so I did that. I got to do that. And then I started offering workshops within the organization, said, hey, I could do workshops for your team, and started doing workshops. And then I bumped into a guy that he's a VP of a petroleum engineering company.
Mhm.
And I said, hey, can I do a workshop for your team? And he said, sure, I'll give you a chance. And I'm like, okay, yes, awesome. So this was the first paid gig outside of the HR job. So I'm like moonlighting or whatever. And I do the assessments with the folks. They have we have great conversations. They get good stuff from it. And then I show up to the office, super nervous to do my first workshop outside of the company I was working for. Sit down, and then the VP says, well, I just want to let you know that the people that were supposed to fly in from Alaska and Arizona, they can't be here, but they're going to be on the phone. Okay. And then the guy that does work here, he can't be in this room because he's sick, so he's down the hall in the office on his phone. Okay. And so then there's 7 of them. So those 3 are not present, but they're on the phone, and then 4 more are in the room. You can't do a workshop when 3 people are on the phone and 4 people are in the room and your PowerPoint doesn't work, because my PowerPoint, of course, was not working. So 20 minutes into it, I'm literally sweating, like visibly sweating. My armpits are wet because it's a mess, right? So finally, the admin lady that's part of it rescues me and starts answering some of my questions, because there was that like, so when you saw your profile and you were thinking about how Joe and you and Joe interact, what did you think? Dead silence, crickets, super awkward, right? So then she finally rescued me, and then the nightmare was over after I think it was an hour and a half. Uh, I walk out with the VP. We walk into the parking lot, and he says, "Hey, great job!" Pats me on the back and shakes my hand. And then I get in my car, and I sit. He walks away, and I sit in my car. I'm like, that was terrible. Like, that was awful. But I was super stoked at the same time. I was like, this is what I want to do, because if he thinks it was okay, I could knock it out of the park if I just improved a little bit. And so that was the first experience of workshops and one-to-one interactions outside of an organization that I worked for. And I gave notice. I literally gave notice at my job that I was going to start my own business and leave. And that was the catalyst of it all.
We love hearing stories like that. On a broader theme, I think something that definitely really resonates, and stories of really successful business people. whenever they first do something, people have the assumption that whenever you see someone really successful, they're like, oh, that they must have done that great their whole lives or their whole time. Actually, I think my second guest that I ever had, Terry Tucker, he said that he's a big motivational speaker now, really, really interesting story. But basically, he said that the first time he ever gave a speech or the first time he gave a talk when he was just early on in his career, he said it went horrible, it went terrible. So I think a lot of times people have this, and definitely it resonates with your story as well. People have this misconception that, oh, like these public speakers, these investors or whatever, these leaders of industry, we're always great, we're always awesome and incredible at whatever they're doing. But reality is, everyone sucked at some point. Like people, I think people forget that. So I mean, it's great to hear that from your perspective, and I'm happy it worked out. Happy it was a the guy gave you a pat on the back and you had great confidence after that. So, I think overall a really cool story, definitely something that people can resonate with for sure.
Well, what's interesting is, how a lot of business owners go to networking events and they have to share what they do in a 30-second commercial or whatever. I started going to networking events when my business first started, and I couldn't do the 30-second commercial without my voice shaking. My voice would shake. I would never say the same thing. It would always seem to fall flat. It was just a mess. And so, I started doing Toastmasters. I started putting myself into places where I had to speak, even though I was not ready. I would just say yes. And I still say yes, because I'm never going to get to that level that I want to get to unless I say yes. And so I get what Terry was saying. I totally agree with him. It's so true.
Just takes practice. But, awesome that you were able to kind of keep it like that. It seems like now you're doing good stuff. And so it brings me to actually the next thing I want to talk about. You have something called the Blue Shirt Leadership Framework. Can you speak a little bit about like what that is and how it's applicable today?
Yeah. So if you want to picture a house, just a regular house, right?
Like
White picket fence house or whatever, however you want to put it.
the American
And
Dream.
what's that?
And I was like, yeah, the American Dream, the white picket fence with the dog.
Right. Exactly. So you picture that. And if you think about every house, it has a foundation, right? You cannot build a house without a foundation. Well, you can, but it'd be a stupid idea. So leadership is very much like that. You need a foundation. And with my framework, the B in blue stands for be a self-aware leader. So that foundation to your leadership is self-awareness. And then the L in blue is lead with accountability. And that's the idea that accountability is the nails that hold your leadership house together. And without accountability, things crumble. And we've seen what happens with leaders that don't have accountability or businesses that don't. It's a mess, and it hurts a lot of people in the process if that accountability is not there. Then the U is to use a growth mindset, and that's the walls and the roof of your leadership. So in any home, as you live in it over the course of time, you end up painting the walls, replacing the carpet, replacing the windows, putting an addition on it. Whatever you do, you're always improving. And as a leader, we need to do that. We need to make subtle adjustments, like put tiles up or paint the wall, or very subtle, or we're doing something major, replacing the roof, replacing the windows, that type of stuff. And that's what we need to do in our leadership, and be always on guard and paying attention to, do we have that growth mindset the whole time? And then the E in blue stands for empower others. And that's your windows and doors. So this is where people see into your leadership and they notice, wow, he's growing, and the people that work with him are growing too, and the business is doing great. And they want a part of that. They want a piece of that. And so they knock on that door, and then you check them out, make a decision if they're the right fit for your culture and your values and all those things. And if they are, then they come and join your team. And then you, of course, empower them to be as successful as possible underneath your leadership. So that's the framework that I help my clients discover within their own style, right? Because I approach that my own way, but every other client that I've ever worked with, they approach it in their own way too. But those 4 pieces are exactly what leaders need to have in place.
Got it. Yep, I was going to say I love the house analogy that you brought up there. I think it's a great way to look at it, and I think the other theme there is I think a lot of times people want to get from. And correct me if this is a wrong way of looking at it, but want to get from like that white picket fence house to a mansion in one step. When in reality, it takes layers of renovation, slow progress. Do you think there's a reason that a lot of people are just kind of impatient and want that, want the goal right away and aren't really able to make like slight pivots when that's actually how it happens? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I would say there's two ways to look at that. One is the changes within us are minor, right? And we need to do that as leaders. We need to make those minor changes consistently. But there's also those leaps, right? Sometimes you're going to leap in your leadership and you're going to move out of that house. And you're going to have another house that has all the four components that I just mentioned, but it's a whole new home and it's bigger because you have more leadership influence and you have more intention of what you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, casting that vision of what do I want this house, this business, this my experience in the world to look like, the larger you cast that vision, the better. When we settle for like a minor improvement in our leadership or a minor improvement in our business, then that's that level of shifting and changing that happens. But when you do a complete mindset shift, which is a huge part of what I focus on with my clients, where you pivot completely in the way that you think about your leadership, the way you think about what's possible, now what is possible completely changes as well. So for instance, if you have some sort of a revenue goal for your business, whatever that is for you, Daniel, 10x it, multiply it by 10. And when you do that, you have to rid yourself of all the other crap that's in the way of what would make it possible to get to that super lofty, impossible goal. And that type of thinking is what catapults people forward. And it's easy as a business owner to just grind and grind and grind, get busy and be happy that I'm busy and all those things. And I don't think that's good. I think that's a distraction when instead you go, what is the most important 20% that I focus on? At my networking event yesterday, I challenged the people in it and I said, hey, what is the 20% most important things that you focus on? What are those 20% that gives you the most success in your business? Focus on that and get rid of the rest. Empower other people to do the rest. Now you're going to exponentially grow, or at least you're going to grow better than just like a percentage of improvement. So in a way, I'm pushing back on you, but at the same time, I agree that we do need to be growing. And sometimes that growth looks incremental, but preferably not.
I think that really makes sense. I like the way you frame that. So it's almost like people should understand that it takes incremental growth, but at times, you have to recognize when you need to make those like lofty leaps and bounds. And just the timing around that is everything. That's where Coach could come in and really help you out with this and that stuff.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Glad we were able to crystallize that. And I think it's a great way of looking at things. Really, the broader theme is have good timing with this kind of stuff. Recognize when you do things small, and then recognize when you have to do things big. So definitely a great point there. The other thing, working as a coach, I know you've gotten a chance to work with a lot of different kinds of businesses, specifically like blue collar and white collar businesses. Just from your perspective, what do you think some of the stark differences are between the kind of blue collar work that you do, well, blue collar clients that you have and the white collar clients that you have?
Yeah, in my experience, the difference is the blue collar business owners stay the technician, to use the E-Myth term. They stay in the work of the business, and it's really difficult for them to step away from the work of the business and, to use language we were using before, work on the business instead.
Yep.
White collar folks, they want to work on the business as much as possible, but then they forget the people. So blue collar folks are afraid to empower the people, but they know that's really important. And they know that's what makes their business successful, because the work of their employees is physical, and the business owner cannot physically do all the work of the organization. And so they see the value of their employees, but they're then afraid to let go completely and fully empower their team so that now they're only working on or over the business. White collar folks, they want to work on it, and they do that, but they don't empower their people enough, right? So they both have the same problem ultimately, but the reason that it exists is very different. And so there requires some training and some coaching around that and some mindset shifts around that. And that's typically where I go with that 20%. What is the most important for you as the business owner that you need to work on, and who can you help to replace yourself, right? So that you can get out of your own way ultimately.
Got it. Interesting. So it's almost like blue collar folks are a little too focused on the technicals. They need to be focused more on having a white, no pun intended, but more of a white collar perspective, and training people, empowering them. And a lot of times white collar struggles, maybe if someone had the career path, they just kind of got into a white collar role instead of kind of advancing through it. They might have the struggle, that's totally fine. But just like from my perspective, they might have the struggle that they're too focused on kind of looking for people like doing the stuff when they're not as like technically familiar. So it's almost like the blue collar, the white collar, they have to become a little more familiar with their counterpart for everything to go right.
Yeah, you have to get out of your own way. It's mostly the issue.
Mhm.
Like I'm in my own way in my business for sure. That's why I have other people that are coming in and helping me out because I'm just in my own way. And all I want to do is work with people. You know,
Mhm.
that's my job, work with people, whether it's sales or networking or coaching. That's all I want to do because
Mhm.
that's what I'm really good at. The rest needs to be passed on to someone else or someone's else, if you will, that are really good at that. And they love that.
Mhm.
That's when you have a successful business, regardless of the industry. When you do that, now you're running a business instead of running a job, if you will.
Yeah, avoiding bottlenecks at all costs. It sounds like when you're able to. I know in the beginning it's tough, but as you go on, try to kind of delegate and reduce those bottlenecks and really improve the process.
Yep.
Awesome, cool. So really interesting to hear about the different struggles or kind of the different way you approach these kind of clients and some of the things that you've seen. Do you have any cool client stories or anecdotes kind of that really stick out to you or that you think are really interesting?
Yeah, I started with a client at the beginning of the year that runs a landscaping and handyman business.
Mhm.
And he came to me just kind of super stressed, like 200 calls a day and wanting his business to grow. The department head for landscape was super stressed also. They didn't have very good teams in place and they had no systems. 6 months later, they had the department head for landscaping way less stressed, still stressed, but way less stressed. The business owner had increased his revenue significantly. There was teams in place and they were rocking it for them. And now they've actually expanded to another location, another city. So he was able to take on the idea of, hey, I need to become more aware of myself and the struggles that I have within myself. And then I need to also hold people accountable for what needs to get done. And at the same time, empower them.
Mhm.
You put that together, he was able to quit running the business from his house and open up a shop and open up an office space, and then now has all the other things that I mentioned. And that's in a 6 month period. So when you when you're able to let go and like focus on the 20%, focus on the most important and let go of the rest, success follows. And it's
Mhm.
really hard to do because it takes a lot of risk to do that, but we don't get to that place without risk.
Without
Right?
tolerance. Yeah.
Yep. So that's one of several stories I could share, but that I'm really excited for him because it's made a huge difference for his family and the people that he's leading their families too.
Wow. It's got to be an awesome impact. But it sounds like you're almost able to take him away from like the stressed mindset of everything getting bottlenecks around him to really building out a system in place where I'm sure he still works really hard and still has the level of stress in his life. Things are a little more smoothed out within the process of his company.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's still an evolution going on, but the evolution was sped up because of the work that he put into it.
Got it. We love to hear us sped up I love evolution that's sped up. Sorry, I don't know why my English isn't great today, but kind of a process improvement. We'll just call it what it is. So interesting to hear about that story and a lot of the thoughts that you have, and I'm sure work that you did with him and work that you did with other clients is kind of really resonates or is mentioned in a book that you released not too long ago. So the title of the book is Right Now Leadership, a four-part framework. We'd love to know any high level takeaways that you think people should have and what people can really take away from reading your book.
Yeah, I've been talking about empowerment quite a bit today, and so in the book I talk about there's five habits or five mindsets, and not or but and five mindsets and five habits of a leader that empowers others. So I want to walk through some of that, and I actually since writing the book, there's some other components that I've figured out as it relates to empowerment. So this is like bonus content for the book. But the idea is, what was the last movie that you saw, Daniel?
The last movie,
Like
oh, the
last great movie, like the movie you're like riveted. It was awesome. You're super stoked to see it.
so I have to caveat this. There's like I've seen a lot of movies, and I only really I know movies like a commitment, so I only go see a movie if I really want to see it. I mean, the last I'll answer in two answers, just because I feel like it'd be an injustice to disinclude the last one. But I saw the recent Adam Sandler movie, the Bat Mitzvah movie. I thought was really good. But the most riveting movie, and I'm sorry, Adam Sandler, by the off chance that you're listening to this, but the most riveting movie that I saw, and this probably doesn't come as a surprise, I saw Oppenheimer in theaters. I mean, that was a spectacular movie. So
Okay.
those are good answers.
Okay, so do you remember when you were watching Oppenheimer, just sitting up straight, focused, eyes peeled, senses engaged, like maybe your heart was beating faster, maybe there was a lot of emotion coming out, like that you were in it, right?
100%.
You
Yeah.
probably lost track of time even, right? This
Definitely.
is when it comes to empowering other people, this is where we need to start. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is start with the assumption that the person that you are leading, whether it's someone that you employ or someone that's just a friend or a family member, a child, that they are fascinating, just like Oppenheimer was fascinating. Embody that. And you can practice this because I do a lot of NLP work. And so you can actually do this by getting into the state in your mind of remembering what it was like to watch Oppenheimer and figure out what that felt like and really embed it in your heart and your mind, and then somehow trigger yourself. It's called anchoring. You can trigger yourself by, pulling an earlobe or touching a knuckle when you get to that feeling. And then when you go to interact with your employees, you can trigger that so that you have this place of intrigue and interest and fascination with them. If you start there, now your brain does a different thing with your employees. Now your brain says, wow, this person's amazing. I need to know what they have to say. I want to learn from them. And so now you're picking up from them these signals that they're giving to you about how brilliant they are, about what insights they have, about how innovative they are, versus when they're just an employee or someone that annoys you because they don't perform at the level you want them to. Then you're picking up those things. And that's where you then pick on those things, and they're not going to ever get to the level that's possible for them. So you start there. Then you study. The second part is to study. And what I mean by that is you study your people. I already mentioned the DISC assessment. That's one way to do it. You have them take assessments, but it's really primarily just being really observant and showing them that you appreciate them and paying attention. And when you do that, you start to learn their personality. Do they communicate visually? Do they communicate audibly? Do they connect when you use language that's visual? Do they connect when they use language that's more hearing based? Do they connect more kinesthetically based? Whatever it is. What's that?
It's like what works best for them, whatever their style works best.
Correct. So you're tuning into that. And then when you connect with them, you use that language around them. Everybody has their own language that they use. And so we need to use that dialect, if you will, to better empower them. So now you've studied them, you're fascinated by them, and then you help them to think for themselves. And how you do that is you ask powerful open-ended questions. And I'll give everybody one question to use. And if this is the only question you use, it will move your business forward. I guarantee it. And it's simple. It's 4 words. You don't even have to write it down. It is, what do you think? That's it. 4 words. What do you think? Someone comes to you with a problem, because this happens all the time, whether it's a kid, a spouse, a friend, and always with the employees, just bring it back and say, well, what do you think? And then you shut up and you listen. You let them stew in the uncomfortableness of you having asked that question. Fourth thing is you hold them accountable for what they think, right? They have an idea. So you hold them accountable to that. And you follow up with them and say, well, how'd it go? You attempted to resolve this in this way. How did it go? And then lastly, you celebrate them or you appreciate them. And you find little ways to appreciate them, and you find big ways to appreciate them that fits their personality, because not everybody wants to be publicly appreciated, for example. So those are the 5 parts, layers, however you want to put it, of empowering people in general, but especially employees.
Got it. So it's almost like you're looking at someone. I think that this is a big issue in corporate America, but you're trying to look at someone through like a positive lens or like a fascinating lens, as opposed to just seeing them as an employee. Because ultimately, it's more likely that their productivity and kind of their general attitude towards work is going to be much better if they feel more appreciated and if they feel more valued as opposed to just another cog in the engine.
Exactly. Yep. And they're going to think better because of that. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're appreciated, Daniel, when someone says something nice to you, your brain changes. Like you
Everyone
get a
feel a lot.
dopamine hit, and that hit helps you think clearer, think
Mhm.
better. And if everybody in the workplace is being empowered in that way with appreciation towards one another and you towards them, you talk about a synergy of ideas and energy and positivity. That is great. And we're talking 1 to 2 comments that you're making over the course of a week towards each employee that you worked with directly. That's not hard. we can pull that off as leaders. So
Definitely. I think it's on that note, it's an interesting kind of oxymoron or something that's contradicting. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, I have so much work, I'm so stressed." When the reality is, when you're doing what you enjoy, and I think another tangent is people need to do what they love in life, but that's a whole other conversation. Another way of looking at it is, people can have a lot of work to do, but when they're doing it with enthusiasm and good faith, and it's really something that they love doing, not that they don't have stress. Stress is an everyday aspect, but when it's combined with like something you enjoy doing, you get that dopamine hit, or there's just a much more broader creativity. And while you're worried about getting a lot of stuff done, it's like you want to do it, you want to approach it, and the less general stress that you have, the more your mind opens up to creativity and productivity and all these things. So definitely a big mental shift that I think a lot of companies don't take into account. But overall, I think it's definitely a great point and really interesting work that you're doing. I always love to kind of end the show on some personal questions. Hope these won't be too hard, but you mentioned that you get a lot of fulfillment, being able to coach these business owners and a lot of these leaders and helping them improve in their lives and ultimately in their businesses. But in your personal life, what brings you happiness, Kyle?
So I'm coaching my daughter's soccer team,
That's
and
awesome.
she, for basically the whole summer, probably every third or fourth day, she's like, "Dad, can you coach my soccer team? Dad, can you coach my soccer team? Because you're going to do a really good job and the team's going to be really good. Dad, can you coach?" And then finally, like signups are about to end to coach. I'm like, okay. So my wife signs me up, and then turns out that every other team but the one I'm on that I'm coaching has an assistant. And I've never played soccer before in any level. So I'm over here alone, but it's been really cool. So that really inspires me, and it's primarily because I get to work with my daughter and be a difference maker in her life, right? And I have two other daughters, and so I'm doing things with them as well. So that kind of stuff is what is really exciting. And to give you a little bit of a glimpse into my personal life, my wife and I took the TV out of our house because our kids got real mad about not being able to watch more than one show, over the course of a few days, and they get real irritated. And my youngest would yell and scream, and we're like, "Well, forget it. We're going to take the TV out." And that has been amazing for us because we interact differently, of course, because of that. But when our kids go to bed, my wife and I have like almost 2 hours where we're just together in the room. And a lot of the time it's just spent reading, but then we'll discuss together what we're reading and have these really powerful conversations. So relationship to me is the only thing that lasts forever. And why not create opportunities to have those relationships? And that's what's been really, what do you say, lighting my fire, if you will.
It's awesome to hear. I think a quick note on that. I actually was at a Shabbat dinner with someone not too long ago who grew up somewhere in like a more rural part of Israel. And he said growing up, they didn't have any TV, kind of not a ton of outside media. Not that it was restricted. Like obviously they had phones and whatnot. But he said he loved his childhood. He read so many books growing up. He like always had a lot of conversations with the family. So I'm not saying that a TV show here and there is bad. Everyone loves to laugh once in a while, but if you don't focus on that, if you just appreciate it within like a fixed amount, but realistically put in the effort to reach stories, have conversations, I think ultimately that's definitely leads to more fulfillment. So glad to see, it's working out there, and I hope your daughter's soccer team wins the championship and can be the coach of the year. That would be a great story. Just on a final note, you've shared a lot of advice, shared a great personal anecdote there too. Is there anything else that you want to share with people, whether it's business advice, life advice, relationship advice? Final word is yours.
Yeah, I was asked this on another podcast this week, and what I said was to be reflective.
Mhm.
I think that we're all in such a hurry, including me. And as I've been working on my life and myself and getting more and more self-aware, I'm realizing that I go too fast. I go way too fast. And if you take the time to reflect, I mean, you can reflect in a bunch of different ways, whatever works for you, but it's really just getting present again. I
Mhm.
want to encourage people to do that because when you reflect, you can think more clearly and you can eliminate the stress and you can eliminate the hurry and that goes on in our lives that creates way too much anxiety for people. So I would urge people to carve out like literally 5 minutes. I'm not talking about a 5-day retreat where you're just reflecting for 5 days. If you can do that, fantastic. But I'm talking about like a 5-minute reflection time first thing in the morning or in the middle of the day. If you can do that, that will move you forward significantly.
Awesome. I think that's a great final word. Some more great guests, and thanks for taking the time to be on the show, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation with Kyle Gillette. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.